If you thought that the pussycat flower was weird in last week's episode, what do you see this one when Josuke, Okios, and their brand new alien friend Mikitaka take on a brand new stand user who has an independent stand, which is a giant transmission tower. That's right, ladies and gentlemen, in this week's episode of JoJo, the brand new stand is known as the Superfly. Honestly, I don't know how the rules work in terms of copyright. Sometimes the stand's names have to be changed, and other times they don't. Why does Superfly have to stay the same and half of the other ones have to be changed? Nitpicking aside, this was a pretty solid episode of JoJo with a lot of different things going on at once, but the main overarching story is that Josuke, Okios, and Mikitaka, their new alien pal, have just discovered a brand new stand user who is this weird, super androgynous looking guy. Now that I think about it, you could use that to describe just about every single JoJo character. Getting back on track, they discover this stand user who is living in this transmission tower, this massive electrical pylon. And when I say he's living there, I mean he's quite literally using this thing as his own personal treehouse / apartment. It's even got a toilet, so if you've ever wanted to shit off of an electrical tower, then I guess this is the stand for you. What's most interesting about this stand, however, are of course its abilities and the fact that it's an independent stand. It doesn't actually rely on its stand user, who goes by the name of Toyohiro. And even though this thing is kind of like a big inanimate object, it actually has the ability to defend itself in a number of different ways. First and foremost, it has the ability to heal itself, and whenever it's attacked by another stand, it actually absorbs that attack and sends it flying right back at the attacker twofold. And even though this stand is independent and doesn't necessarily rely on its user, it still needs someone there in order for it to function. You see, the actual stand user, Toyohiro, cannot leave this stand unless someone else walks into it. And if someone walks in and tries to escape, their body will start to transform into this metallic form and they'll start to assimilate with the transmission tower, the Superfly itself. They essentially become the backbone of this thing, which is pretty creepy and leads to a lot of great imagery in this episode of Josuke constantly trying to escape and him transforming into this weird mecha-looking version of himself. The best things about this stand, though, are just actually seeing its powers in action. The way this guy sort of lives here is very unique. Not only is he able to just sort of traverse it so perfectly with the use of ropes, but he's actually able to travel around it by riding around on the bolts that it fires around. This, of course, leads to some ridiculous imagery, so ridiculous, in fact, that it could only exist in JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. So Josuke ends up getting trapped inside. Okios can't do anything because all of his attacks get sent right back at him. That's when Mikitaka comes in and actually transforms into one of these electrical wires, tricks Toyohiro for just a split second. Unfortunately for our brand new alien buddy, he does get tricked, because it seems like he's actually assimilated with a part of that electrical wire, and when it ends up getting cut by Toyohiro, the actual tower decides to attack back, and it ends up basically crucifying Mikitaka to the actual tower when all of these bolts get stuck into his hand. It's pretty freaky, and it's weird to actually have some damage put on this character for once, who doesn't seem to react to it too much. Maybe that's just his alien sensibilities, which I'm fully convinced he's an alien at this point. It's the only explanation for his ridiculous powers. And speaking of new stand users, there are a few other crazy events going on in this episode. Basically, the whole thing with Superfly kind of leaves at a cliffhanger, but there are these other brand new stand users who are appearing around town and actually abducting some of the key characters from the series. This one gray-haired guy keeps popping up. You don't actually get to see him fully, but it looks like he kidnaps not only Koichi, but even Josuke's mom, who finally decides to make an appearance after a really long time. And then there's this guy who is quite possibly even weirder hanging outside of Rohan's house. He has a ridiculous hairstyle and these huge floppy ears, and I can't wait to see what his deal is. He's actually in the intro, oh so subtly at the part where they're actually going through the doors in Rohan's house. So clearly he's going to have some sort of big connection to him, and I'm sure that's going to lead to a really big battle. But what all of these characters have to do with one another, I think, is the most interesting thing. Clearly, Kira's father has been very busy in trying to create some sort of brand new stand users to defend himself and his son so that they can't steal the bow and arrow. Not to mention, it looks like Kira's brand new son is still investigating everything that he's doing, trying to figure out why his dad has been acting so strange. So what's the rundown on this week's episode of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure Diamond is Unbreakable? Again, the creativity of the series never ceases to amaze me. How they can take something so simple as just a giant electrical tower and ended up turning it into one of the most unique settings from from the entire series. The fact that it's a stand too is also incredibly unique. The character of Toyohiro is definitely the most memorable part of this episode, if only for how incredibly strange he is. He's such a weird looking character. You always know when there's a main character in JoJo if they're extremely androgynous and have the most ridiculous outfit, and 90% of the time they have weird markings all over their clothes or paint on their face. This guy pretty much falls into every single category, so he is definitely destroying the weird shit-o-meter. What is funny though is that he's actually able to live pretty comfortably within this transmission tower. He's right next to a lake so he can always fish. He even has a garden right next to it, which he actually uses his fertilized piss and shit for, which leads to a funny scene when all that ends up spraying on Josuke and Okuyasa's face. But clearly they're going to have to come up with some sort of plan in order to trick this guy into staying in so that they can get Mikitaka out. I really can't wait to see how they're going to pull that off, and maybe they'll actually be able to use this thing's abilities against it in some interesting way. What I will say is I'm completely glued to my screen while watching this week's episode, and that's saying a lot considering that they were mostly in one setting the entire time, and this Superfly stand is not exactly the most flashy thing in the world, but it's just different and interesting, and they always manage to do that in the JoJo series. They always manage to one-up themselves in the weird department, and this episode is absolutely no exception. It's also done with some pretty decent animation and artwork that you would expect from the Diamond is Unbreakable series. So this one was honestly pretty solid. It's the beginning of a two-parter, so we don't have any resolution yet, but I love the way that they're building up this main story with Superfly, as well as introducing some other brand new characters for Rohan, Koichi, and Josuke's mom to go up against. I can't wait to see how everything's going to connect at the end of the day, and even if it doesn't, I just love that all of these things are actually going into motion. It's really exciting stuff. I also can't wait to spend more time with Kira and his brand new family, which I think is honestly one of the most refreshing things about this current arc of the series, especially after last week's wacky episode with that cat flower. I cannot wait to get back to that to see how that actual story is going to be resolved. Instead, it looks like we're going to have to deal with this ridiculous transmission tower, the Superfly. Otherwise, this was a pretty super episode of JoJo in my humble opinion. I actually really enjoyed it. I thought it was a little strange and a little long-winded at times, but I really love the way they told the story this week, especially giving you everything in real time, showing you exactly when these events are happening. There's sure to be some significance to that. For the most part, this story completely takes place on July 15th, starting in the morning, and little by little, all of the events start to snowball into one another. So I'm really interested to see what they're going to do with that. All I know is, exciting episode of JoJo. I'm giving this one right here a 4 out of 5. A pretty damn solid episode. That was a little slow and sloppy in some moments, but for the most part, I'm sure it's going to pay off when we get to the second episode of this awesome two-parter. So there it is. That's my thoughts on this week's episode of JoJo. But if any of you guys did watch this week's episode, make sure to tell me what you thought about it in the comment section below. What do you think of the Superfly stand? How are they going to be able to save their friend? And what is the deal with these other stand users appearing before Rohan, Koichi, and Josuke's mother? And what do you hope to see from the rest of Diamond is Unbreakable? Please tell me in the comment section below. Thank you guys so much for watching this review. I really appreciate it. Make sure to subscribe, leave me a like or a comment or two. Thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you next time. And as always, stay dandy, baby.